Okay, guys, this is the last video for the week. You should have already seen the videos on different ways to solve equations with factoring and completing the square. And then this is the last one called using the quadratic formula. Hopefully you've seen it before, but maybe not, if that's okay if you haven't. So let's look at what the actual quadratic formula is. It is going to be x equals opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So this a, b, and c that you see here is the a, b, and c. That's wrong. A, b, and c from standard form ax squared plus bx plus c. This a, b, and c are the a, b, and c that are being used here in the quadratic formula. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is make sure, so step one here is make sure that it's set equal to 0. Check. Identify a, b, and c, okay? So a is 3, b is -5, and c is -2. You want to make sure you do take those signs with them. The signs are very important. Okay, so let's fill in what we have. So we have x equals opposite of b. So the opposite of -5 is +5 plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c. And remember, we wrote a, b, and c up here at the top so that we can know what a, b, and c are, filling them into our equation, all divided by 2 times the a value, which is 3. Then the next thing we want to do is simplify as best we can. So to simplify this, we want to look and see what we can actually simplify first. So -5 squared is 25. So we can do that. And minus, so -4 times 3 is -12. -12 times -2 is +24, all over 2 times 3, which is 6. Then we want to keep simplifying from there. Next thing we can do is add the 25 and 24 together. Okay, and add those together, you get 5 plus or minus the square root of 49 over 6. And we know that the square root of 49 is 7. So this is 5 plus or minus 7 over 6. So what this means is we actually have two answers. We have 5 plus 7 over 6 and 5 minus 7 over 6. So 5 plus 7 is 12. 12 divided by 6 is 2. 5 minus 7 is -2 over 6, which simplifies to -1/3. So here are our answers. Okay, now that you've seen one, that doesn't mean you can do a ton of them because it does take a little bit of practice. So let's look here at this one. First step is always to get it equal to 0. So that means we have to minus the 4. So we're going to have 3x squared minus x minus 4 equals 0. Next step, identify a, b, and c. A is 3, b is -1, c is -4. Notice that a, b, and c do not have letters. They are just numbers, and that should always be the case. If you don't remember the quadratic formula, then go ahead and write it up here at the top. Opposite b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c, all divided by 2a. I will also upload a video of a song, like a sing-song way to remember it, for if you do not remember the formula and you need a way to remember it. All right, so let's go ahead and fill this in. So opposite of b, so opposite sign of -1 is +1, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c, all divided by 2 times a. So I filled in the values of what I know. All right, let's go ahead and simplify those. Okay. And 1 plus or minus the square root of -1 squared is 1. 4 times -4 times 3 times -4 is 48. So plus 48, because the negative times negative makes it a positive, over 6. So then the next step, 1 plus or minus the square root of 49 again over 6. So that becomes 1 plus or minus 7. I don't know why I started writing that 7 so low. Okay, and then over 6. So then that gives me 1 plus 7 over 6 and 1 minus 7 over 6. So 1 plus 7 is 8 over 6, which simplifies to 4 over 3. 1 minus 7 is negative 6 over 6, which simplifies to negative 1. Hopefully this is making a little bit more sense. It might be one of those things that after you see a few examples, it does help you to do this a little bit better. Okay. All right, let's look at the next one. So this one, if you notice, has a problem of it only having one thing on the left and two things on the right. So remember, the first thing we always want to do is get everything all on one side to set it equal to 0. So let's minus the 9x squared. So then we get 0 equals negative 9x squared minus 6x minus 1. It doesn't matter what side you end up moving it to. It'll end up giving you the same answer. Okay, so to look at this, we want to set it up and have identify A, B, and C. So A is negative 9, B is negative 6, C is negative 1. Fill them in. So opposite of B, so opposite of negative 6 is positive 6, plus or minus the square root of negative 6 squared minus 4 times A times C, all divided by 2 times A. Okay, so now we simplify that, and we get 6 plus or minus the square root of negative 6 squared is 36. Negative 4 times 9 is 36, and 36 times negative 1 is negative 36. Divided by negative 18. Negative 30, or 36 minus 36 is 0. So this becomes 6 over negative 18. Well, I guess you can write plus or minus the square root of 0 if you want to, but square root of 0 is just 0. So we get 6 over negative 18, which simplifies to negative 1/3. So you notice before we always had two answers, and this one we only had one. Something we're going to talk about a little bit later is that the reason we only have one of these is because our square root disappeared. So when that square root does disappear, when you notice that this is going to be a 0 here, that is when you notice that you are going to only have one solution. Okay, we have 2 more to go, and then I'm going to have you try some on your own. So first thing we want to look at, it does already equal 0, so we're good there. So let's just identify A, B, and C. A is 1, B is 3, and C is negative 5. Sorry, I'm having trouble with my equal signs. Okay, so let's go ahead and fill it in. So, oh, if you forgot it, let me go ahead and write it at the top for you. Opposite of B, plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4AC, all divided by 2A. All right, so let's fill that in. So opposite of B, so it's positive, so it's going to become negative 3 plus or minus the square root of B squared, 3 squared, minus 4 times A, which is 1, times C, which is negative 5, all divided by 2 times A. Okay, let's simplify. So negative 3 just stays where it is. 3 squared is 9. Negative 4 times 1 times negative 5 is positive 20. Divided by 2 times 1 is 2. Okay, keep simplifying. Negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 29, all divided by 2. And then we have to think to ourselves, can we break down the square root of 29? Can we break down that radical into something that has pairs? We can't. 29 is actually a prime number, so it doesn't break down at all. So this is our answer. Okay, let's look at the last problem on here. And the problem is it does not equal 0 already. So let's add the 2x squared to the other side. So we get 0 equals 2x squared plus 4x plus 3. So then we can say A equals 2, B equals 4, and C equals 3. Okay. Next step, plug them in. Opposite of B, so it's going to be negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 4 squared minus 4 times A times C, all divided by 2 times A. Okay, and now we got to simplify. So that's out here, -4 plus or minus square root of 4 squared is 16, and -4 times 2 is -8. -8 times 3 is -24, divided by 2 times 2 is 4. Well, we're going to have a slight little difference here going on because inside that radical is actually going to be a negative. So let's talk about what's going to happen there. So when we do this, we have to look and see what ends up happening when we simplify. So we're going to have -4 plus or minus the square root of -8 over 4. So we notice that we get a -8 underneath the radical. Well, we've talked about simplifying radicals before. It's the first part of this unit that we did. So if I take this and I simplify it, I can break down 8 as 4 times 2, break down 4 as 2 times 2, and don't forget you need to cross out the ones we broke down, and then we need a pair because it's a square root. So this set of 2's gets to come to the outside. So we have -4 plus or minus 2, and then we're left with that 2 on the inside, but there's one little thing we didn't deal with. This negative actually gets written as a -1 here, and to take the square root of -1, it is actually an imaginary number that we call I. We're not going to talk about this a whole lot, but for this instance, we are going to write it here. And then the last thing that we need to notice is that each of these numbers, 4, I'm going to point to them for you, 4 or -4, 2, and 4 on the bottom are all divisible by 2. And since they're divisible by 2, we are actually going to divide each of them by 2 and simplify. So this becomes -2 plus or minus I root 2 over 2. The one key thing I want you to remember, you cannot change inside radical to simplify. Okay, I want you to take a little bit, pause the video, and look at the next slide and try those 3 practice problems on your own. Once you do hit play again, there is going to be basically just showing you all the answers and a quick explanation of them. Okay, so if you look over the work I have up here, you can see what I did to solve these problems. So stop and check your work, and if you do have any questions, we can talk about it during class, or if you want to book office hours, you can also do that. We do have a few more practice problems that we're going to be doing in class, and they will be using the book. So please make sure you have your book readily available for class tomorrow. See you guys.